Today's episode is called Soaring High, celebrating National Aviation Day. Milestones of the past and visions for the future. Well, I'm Tonykern, your host. Sometimes I look at my career in aviation as a microcosm to everything that's gone on over the past 120 years or so in our industry. I mean, the first time I was in an airplane, I had a set of controls in front of me. I joined the Air Force with zero flying time, even as a passenger. So, as someone who spent decades exploring the human side of flight, the triumphs, the challenges, the sheer wonder of what it means to defy gravity, I thought we'd dive into this thing that pops up on our calendar every year on August 19th. It's called National Aviation Day. And you can look at just about any day in the year, and there's, National Hot Dog Day, National Kiss Your Dog Day, whatever it is. But this one's always been special to me. Every year on August 19th, we celebrate National Aviation Day. It was established all the way back in 1939 by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and it honors the birthday of Orville Wright. And it celebrates all the incredible advancements in aviation that we've seen throughout the year. And so I think it's a perfect time to reflect on how far we've come since those first tentative flights that we took, and kind of maybe throw it out into the larger sphere of what we do here on Only Human, and talk about how in 120 years, just a few generations, an entire industry has taken flight around the ingenuity, bravery, and persistence of a few individuals that wouldn't take no for an answer. Okay? So let's take a few minutes to reflect on how far we've come since those early days, and maybe even dream about where we're headed next. And along the way, think about the things that are going on in our own lives, that if we apply that same ingenuity, resolve, persistence, courage, we might do for ourselves. So, I flew in the Air Force for 20 years. I was a slow learner. I was always right on the learning curve. If you were supposed to be able to land a no-flap landing on the sixth sortie, it was late on the sixth sortie when I could land a no-flap. But I learned something about myself. I learned that if I took training seriously, if I took the time to reflect and improve on each and every hour, I wasn't logging hours, I was logging lessons, right? That I could do a lot of things that I never thought I could do. And, from those early days of flying to, running the U.S. Forest Service aviation program, the largest non-military government program in the world, I can tell you, aviation is not just about machines. It's not just about systems. Aviation is about the human spirit pushing boundaries. Right? So in this short episode, we're going to journey through a couple of historical milestones that shaped us. And I'll try to weave in the human stories that make them so compelling. And then we'll maybe gaze into the future a little bit, talk about the moon and Mars and beyond, talk about sustainability here on Earth. Right? And whether you're a pilot, whether you're just an aviation enthusiast, or you're somebody else that's watching this because you've always seen aviation as one of those industries that intrigues you, or just somebody that likes a good story, buckle up, man. We're clear for takeoffs. Let's start at not really the beginning, because people have been thinking about flying ever since they've looked to the sky and saw what birds can do, right? But let's start at the beginning of powered manned flight. Okay? And we're going to see that aviation is just like a tapestry of daring dreams, ingenious inventions, and human persistence in the face of failure and failure because of gravity that could result in death. And of course, it all began with the Wright brothers. On December 17th, 1903, at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, Orville Wright piloted the first powered controlled flight, 12 seconds. 10 feet per second, 120 feet. Think about that. 12 seconds of flight, 120 feet. But now let's think a little bit about what it took to get there, right? Who were these guys? Orville and Wilbur weren't just tinkerers. They were self-taught engineers who had to try to figure out the Bernoulli equation when it wasn't really there. I mean, they warped wings. They tried different aspect ratios, different power plants, until they finally kind of got it, right? They finally got it. And along the way, people laughed at them, right? They were ridiculed. They were spending all their money on this folly, right? They had crashes. They had countless setbacks. But at the end of the day, their success wasn't luck. It was grit, right? And that grit was driven by curiosity and a refusal to accept that powered flight was impossible. And like I always say, when I'm out there on stages around the world talking about human performance, aviation milestones are important. They're important to me because it reminds me, and it should remind us all, that excellence comes from discipline. Right? It comes from learning from setbacks, not giving up after them. And you got to realize you're going to have a lot of setbacks when you're trying anything truly new, truly innovative, truly bold. Right? So let's fast forward to World War I. So Wright brothers, 1903, World War I, 10, 12, 14 years later, and aviation leapt from a novelty to a necessity of war, right? Between 1914 and 1918, planes evolved from being kind of fragile scout things where they'd go up and fly over the enemy line, come back and say, yeah, there's a bunch of guys down there, right? To weapon systems, formidable fighters, right? Pilots like Eddie Richthofen, Manfred von Richthofen. Did I say Eddie Rickenbacker? Or did I say Richthofen? Eddie Rickenbacker, the Red Baron, von Richthofen. Those guys became legends, right? But at a tremendous human cost. In World War I, over 16,000 airmen lost their lives in combat. A lot of them just simply from crashes, not necessarily shot down. And that highlighted the raw dangers of flight when an airplane became less of a curiosity and more of a tool. But this was an era, same thing's going to happen in World War II, by the way, that taught us the critical lessons in human factors, right? Operations while fatigued, decision-making under stress, the need for actual training, right? These are themes that echo across the generations. I wrote a lot about them in Redefining Airmanship, Flight Discipline, Darker Shades of Blue, back when I was looking at the history of flight and where we've come and what we can learn from it. So then World War I's over and we get into the roaring 20s, right? And we have barnstormers. Aviation comes into the public eye with folks like Charles Lindbergh. Solo transatlantic flight happened in, I think, 1927, right? Is that right? Yeah. Crossing from New York to Paris, flying the Spirit of St. Louis, 33.5 hours nonstop. Right? No autopilot, basically flying with a winded flight plan, no GPS, no INS, but a lot of grit and a lot of courage. 33.5 hours nonstop. So we battled what? Sleep deprivation, technology, navigation challenges. And he's written a lot about that. It's worth reading. And this wasn't just a technological feat, right? When you look at it from Lindbergh's point of view, it was a testament to human endurance. And Lindbergh brought a global aviation boom. When people realized we could cross the Atlantic in an airplane, it inspired countless others to take to the skies. And this time, it wasn't a military necessity, it became a commercial one. And like so many things, when you can make money doing things, people get really busy doing new things. I like, at this point, to also talk about Amelia Earhart. And now, supposedly, for about the 100th time, they've found the real wreckage of her aircraft and what happened to her. But Amelia Earhart was a trailblazing aviatrix. 1932, she became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. And her story is not only about breaking glass ceilings and barriers. She was not just flying airplanes, she was shattering gender norms, right? In what had previously been an exclusively male-dominated field. And when she disappeared in 1937, when she was attempting to fly around the world, once again, we see that this is pretty unforgiving, right? And it reminds us that progress always comes with risks. And therefore, it always comes with courage. And as we celebrate National Aviation Day, I think it's important to remember people that went out and never came back, right? And honor figures like Earhart and others for showing us that aviation's open to everybody, but everybody with a big spirit, a lot of courage, and a lot of determination. So then World War II, where we saw everything, multi-crewed, 10-person crewed B-17s. We saw the P-51 Mustang. By the time that the war was over, we were seeing jet aircraft being engineered by the Germans, right? Messerschmitts. All kinds of advances made during World War II. And then in the post-war years, we saw a World War II hero, Flying Sergeant Chuck Yeager, break the sound barrier in 1947 in the Bell X-1, where he reached Mach 1.06. And Yeager's still around today, right? Not physically, but he's definitely around in the hearts of every aviator who gets a true emergency, right? Because his calmness under pressure. Remember when he broke the sound barrier? You might not remember this, but he'd fallen off a horse the night before and had several cracked ribs, but he wouldn't go to the doctor, right? So Yeager became kind of the prototype of what became known as the right stuff, right? And we eventually are going to see a movie, a book by Tom Wolfe, and a movie about those early solo fighter pilots that also became the guys who were the first astronauts selected to go up in the Mercury program. When Yeager broke the sound barrier, it wasn't just a technological breakthrough. We began to see another commercial advantage of swept wings and different types of engines, the altitudes we could fly at, and paved the way for commercial jets, right? Like the Boeing 707, which came out in 1958. 4-engine aircraft that basically shrunk the world and made air travel affordable and accessible to millions of people. So we move into the 60s and 70s. Now I'm alive, and we see supersonic aircraft like the Concorde. Right? In 1976, you could fly from London to New York in under 3 hours. But then we also started to notice some other things like, noise pollution, high cost of building these airplanes, high cost to sustain these airplanes, sustainability because of the parts. And the Concorde was eventually retired, I think, 2002, 2003, something like that. But again, it was so different. It was a clear example of human ingenuity that shone through its design. And then all of the things that made it commercially viable for the long run taught us about sustainability, something we'll revisit again here in just a second. Closer to home, about the same time, we're building the space shuttle, right? A vehicle that can go into space and come back and land. Right? And all of a sudden, the lines are blurred between atmospheric flight and space. It became almost routine to see space shuttle launches. Sally Ride, first female in space. And then, of course, we had the Challenger and Columbia tragedies, which taught us a lot about flying aircraft past their useful service lives and taking risks that were unwise, even when the risks were known prior to takeoff. And once again, it expanded our horizons and made us look a little bit more thoughtfully and have influenced the technologies of today. Everything today is built with a useful service life in mind and inspected in ways that didn't even exist back in the 1980s to ensure that we don't have those type of technology failures. I mean, the fact that Elon Musk is getting ready to send up his 10th Starship flight, which costs a lot each time they launch it, as you well know, failing faster, failing forward at tremendous cost, because they have the vision that when they get this right, it's going to significantly reduce the cost and open up the solar system, if not beyond, to manned spaceflight. So kind of throughout all these milestones, I think the human thread's clear, right? From the persistence of the Wright brothers to Yeager's courage. Aviation's progress is driven by people who will embrace the risk, who are humble. And when you say the name Chuck Yeager and humble, a lot of people will not equate the two, but he understood how to learn from his mistakes. We've learned over the years, when you get into a standardized operation that becomes routine, like a lot of the Part 121 flights from point A to point B, just how important professionalism is and readiness is, because we don't fail now on the high risk end of the spectrum. We fail on the routine end of the spectrum because we get complacent and we stop leaning into every task. We've kind of forgotten what it is to fly. So let's turn our eyes for a minute to the future, right? Because National Aviation Day isn't just about celebrating the machines and the people behind them, but it's about turning our eyes skyward to what might be possible in the future. What's the next 100 years look like? I don't know, but let's just take the next year. In 2025, aviation's on the cusp of transformative changes, right? Driven by technology, new fuels, new composites, electric engines, all those things driven by people who had a dream, right? People who innovated, willing to take the risks, spend some money. And our industry outlook's pretty good. The air travel demand is expected to grow by 6 to 7% this year alone, as we kind of rebuild on the post-pandemic recovery. But with that growth comes new challenges. Okay? Supply chain right now, aging fleets, aging infrastructure. Some of the things we're seeing out there, I experienced last week when Philadelphia Center had to throttle back arrivals into the Northeast to 28 aircraft per hour because they were oversaturated with their old technology and understaffing. There's a lot of weird stuff going on, a lot of cool stuff going on. The whole sustainable aviation fuel is one of them that intrigues me, right? Everything from, burning things that have less carbon emissions to hydrogen-powered vehicles, electrical-powered vehicles. We can see already from some of the science, we can reduce emissions by nearly 80% with some of these fuels. But are they safe? Are they readily available? Will the supply meet the demand? Will the pilots and the crews adapt to new procedures, new engines, that come along with this eco-friendly world that we're talking about? Electric and hybrid aircraft, even, yes, this is going to raise some hackles, unmanned aircraft are game changers that are in our future somewhere. Maybe not right away, especially in Part 121 passenger operations. But, there's companies out there like Joby and Lilium that are developing electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, eVTOLs, for urban mobility. You can hop in one of these things, say, I want to go here, push a button, and it's just you in the machine. Right? Kind of like taking a taxi, zipping between city rooftops. That's reality today. By 2025, we could see commercial operations around the world for these things by the end of the year. And then we'll see if it's commercially viable, right? But what would that do? It would reduce ground traffic, it would reduce congestion, and I think it would open up new career paths for, I don't know whether we want to call these people pilots or equipment operators or equipment monitors, but they're going to have to be maintained. They're going to have to fit into the air traffic control system. So once again, really, really cool stuff that has to integrate all together. And it's the minds of people, aviation minds, that are driving this forward. We haven't even touched on what artificial intelligence and machine learning could do to revolutionize what we're doing. Everything from predictive maintenance to air traffic control. AI is capable already, and just in its infancy, of analyzing vast data to prevent delays, let pilots sleep in an hour or two longer, maybe detect fatigue in the cockpit or with the air crews. And it's all tied directly into human factors research that's been going on for a long time. We're seeing already biometrics like facial recognition for boarding, hopefully to streamline the passenger experience, which hasn't been very fun these last few months and years. Automation in the cockpit is going to continue to evolve, allowing pilots to focus on important things rather than just monitoring systems. But the future is not going to be without hurdles, just like it's been in the past. A lot of them we can't see, some of them we can. Cybersecurity threats, probably the biggest one, with hackers targeting aviation systems. Mental health for aviation professionals, in my mind, is the most crucial issue we face today as we make this transition into new models of flight. And we need to navigate these challenges by getting in front of them, man, while keeping the human side of this at the core. Because as the technology improves, and it's always going to improve, the failures will become more and more frequent, human failures. And we need to stay out in front of that human element anytime we anticipate we might be adding a change into the system. So I guess as we wrap up this celebration, I'm celebrating it. I don't know about everybody else, but I'm celebrating National Aviation Day. Keep in mind that aviation's greatest milestones weren't achieved by billionaires or geniuses. They were achieved by ordinary human beings that persevered to achieve extraordinary things. Whether we reflect on the Wright brothers, first flight, or envisioning electric skies and trips to Mars, let's commit to fostering that human element and professionalism, keeping safety first and forefront as we head into the future. So thanks for joining me on Only Human. Let me rant a little bit about a topic that's important to me. If you're inspired, go visit a local airport, take a flight lesson, share your aviation stories with us on social media or anywhere else. Until next time, keep your head in the clouds, your feet on the ground, do it safely, keep flying high, become all you can with the resources that you have. Thanks. We'll see you next week.